can the members of the amazing digital circus actually feel pain? Well, to answer this, first we have to look at this scene in episode 2, where the trucks are on the bumpy road and begin to bounce out of control. This causes Ragatha and Kinger to both fall to the ground, and when they rise, several knives can be seen poking out of them. Obviously, if you had several knives in your skin, you'd probably need to go to the ER, but funnily enough, Ragatha and Kinger just both walk it off as a minor inconvenience. We even see when the anchor causes the two trucks to collide, a spike goes through, impaling Ragatha in the chest. But yet again, she just looks at it as like she spilled something on her dress. But why don't the circus members feel pain in these usually deadly situations? Well, you may think that the members of the digital circus just can't feel pain because it's some sort of video game, but as you'll see later in this video, that's actually the furthest thing from the truth. When Pomni first enters the circus, she promptly tries to remove the headset that's on her head, but as we can see, she instead starts pulling at her face, even pulling her eye out of socket by the root, as well as contorting and stretching her face in unnatural ways. This is the first piece of proof that the circus members don't process pain as they would in real life, because if you pulled your eye out of socket, especially by the root, you would probably pass out from how painful it would be. But here, Pomni doesn't even seem to break a sweat. Her face even becomes elastic and snaps back into its original place as if nothing even happened. And after everything is said and done, Pomni is simply more worried about where she is, and she doesn't even seem fazed by what she was actually just doing to her face, showing that it seemingly didn't hurt a whole lot. Now, this case specifically could have just been one of the many slapstick antics that we find Pomni perform in the show. It's important to distinguish what would be considered a gag as to what would actually be considered painful to the circus members. One scenario the creator intended to be intentionally painful to the characters was this part with Ragatha right here. When Kaufma was unleashed from his room, he becomes violent and targets Ragatha, attacking her and throwing her against the walls of the dorms. When Kaufmo comes into contact with Ragatha, however, she becomes somewhat glitched out or abstracted herself. In this scene, we can see Ragatha glitching violently and groaning in pain, asking Pomni to help her. She even tells Pomni this at the end of the episode.
I am in so much pain!
So this seems to be one of the things that can actually hurt the members of the digital circus, and I think I know why. The characters, at the end of the day, are made of code, so if they glitch out, it's most likely their DNA being scrambled and rearranged. Sort of like if all the cells in your body turned into a fine material. It would probably be really painful, similar to how the code of a character glitching could severely harm them. But there's actually one question that has been in my mind ever since the release of the second episode. Can NPCs also feel pain like humans do? Well, this may sound stupid. There's actually a lot more to this theory than you may think, because we know that Gummy Goo is an advanced NPC that can also feel human emotions. So theoretically, could he also feel pain? Well, to figure that out, we have to look at the scene where Pomni and Gummy Goo are in the out-of-bounds backrooms area. Gummy Goo witnesses something that's quite traumatized, and Pomni has to explain to him that he is not a real person, but instead an NPC. While he's having this realization, however, he says this.
You have a mom?
Shouldn't she be here with everyone else? I can't even remember her face. Did she ever have a face?
As you can see, Gummy Goo is starting to remember his mother's face, despite talking about her several times in the episode and seemingly being quite fond of his mother. The reason Gummy Goo doesn't remember his mother's face is because he isn't supposed to. The game ends before he ever quote-unquote meets his mother, so there would be no reason for his mom to even have a face in the first place. And this has some great implications. All of the NPC's memories are predetermined, and the memories they have aren't actually true. They never lived a real life to gain those memories. Instead, those memories are just straight up given to them. This is quite obviously sad for Gummy Goo, as he realizes he's not even a real person. But was there any where Gummy Goo ever felt pain? Well, maybe mental pain, yes, definitely. But physical pain? Well, we could argue that Kane killing him was painful, but I see this moment as more of Kane despawning Gummy Goo rather than actually a painful death. I mean, come on, Kane even coded a little confetti effect when he died. This couldn't have been that painful. But what could have been painful for the characters, which I haven't actually seen a lot of people talking about, is this scene right here in the void, when Kane is giving Pomni a tour around the grounds of the circus. He explains that this area has not been completed yet, and is currently just an out-of-bounds empty space. face. Pomni looks quite frightened by this whole thing, and Kane grabs Pomni and zooms her back into the circus, where Kane puts her down on the floor, but she stumbles a bit and then pukes. This is a bit strange because the characters in the Amazing Digital Circus don't have to eat, so what would be in Pomni's stomach that she could even throw up? Well, this actually occurs again in episode 2. When Pomni and Gummy Goo get trapped down in the out-of-bounds backrooms area, Pomni explains that Gummy Goo is an NPC and they formulate a plan to escape, which is to use the broken collision to fling the truck back into bounds. They both land and then puke. Now, this might seem a bit random, but we really shouldn't ignore that both times a character is shown puking, it's because they were in an out-of-bounds area. My theory on this is that when the characters are taken out of bounds, they begin to behave irregularly, almost like an NPC in a video game when they are somewhere they are not supposed to be. So this causes them to puke up that black silver stuff, which probably shouldn't be possible in the first place, because they can't eat. And because they can't eat, this is most likely a thing that Kane purposely coded into the game, because whatever they're throwing up isn't food. In fact, it almost looks the exact same as the stuff that the abstracted characters are made out of. But hey, that's a theory for another day. There's still yet another thing that can give us more evidence on if the circus members can feel pain that we have to look at. In episode 2, there are a lot more scenarios where the characters feel pain. First, we get more proof that nothing can really hurt the Digital Circus characters. In the first scene, we see Pomni awake from her dream startled. As she falls out of bed, she lands into one of the blocks and begins to violently collide with its geometry before shooting up into the ceiling back down to the floor. Which this is interesting because this was a quote-unquote glitch that didn't seem to hurt Pomni as much as the one Ragatha was hurt by. This makes me wonder if the only pain they can feel at all is abstracting glitches, rather than any glitches at all, because otherwise, clipping into the block probably would have been quite painful. But since it wasn't altering her body, or code, in the way abstraction does, she was only scared to this happening, presumably not feeling any pain. There's also a lot of instances of characters getting hurt in episode 2 that I think we should get into as well. Firstly, in the truck scene, Jax grabs Pomni by the throat and throws her out of the window. That's pretty much just the beginning of it though, because I think it's safe to assume that if he grabbed her by the neck like that and compressed it that much, her windpipe would most likely be crushed due to all of the pain. But that's not all though, because we see Pomni grab onto both of the trucks, which ends up causing Pomni's arm to stretch very far. This of all things would be very painful, but Pomni looks somewhat uncomfortable in that pain. Next, there's the scene where the gummy alligator gets knocked out of the truck, but you can see him holding onto the rope and sliding across the ground. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was a gummy alligator sliding across the ground that fast against rocks, I think it would pretty much melt into nothing. So I'm not sure how the alligator is surviving all this. Even as a person, your feet would get all torn up, but I don't think this bothers him whatsoever. The last thing that I've been dying to talk about is how eating and sleeping works in the circus. It's actually explained in different parts of the episode that both eating and sleeping isn't actually necessary, but they do it still, most likely just to cure boredom. I think this might prove that the characters aren't actually as human as we think, because they don't do any of the basic human functions such as eating or sleeping, but this is most likely just due to game design. Even Kane remarks in the second episode that it's been a while since he's drunk water.
I'm gonna go drink water! It's been a while since I've done that.
Because functions like this are necessary to our survival, and don't apply at all in this digital world. But why do they still insist on participating in meals and sleeping, even when they don't need to? Well, I think the reason is to bring back some sense of normalcy in their lives. When everyone was put in the Amazing Digital Circus, they were basically anything but human, all code in a brand new body and everything. So I think I can rest my case by saying that the characters in the Amazing Digital Circus don't really feel pain. Through almost every instance of the characters in situations that should have harmed them, they seem not to care. If anything, the only thing that seems to cause pain in the game is glitches that Kane created.